Yeah, good to go. I just think that we're always reading guns. Anytime something is up, it's always an idea.
Probably get on and send my review for.
Yeah.
But then we get some stuff, but then it's like, we're ready. Church. Ordinances.
Actually, 10 seconds.
You're on this.
She said we're ready.
We'll let Wendy sit down, maybe.
I'd rather fix our ordinances.
Yeah. All right. We'd like to welcome everybody out to the July 7th Harriman City Planning Commission, the regular Planning Commission meeting. We appreciate everybody being here tonight. We'll go ahead and begin our meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance, which will be led by Mr. Ben Duzant. Hopefully I said that right. Ben?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Ben. We appreciate that. We do have a full quorum tonight. Appreciate our members being here tonight. Want to ask from our members if there's any conflicts of interest for any of the items that are on the agenda tonight. No. All right. With that, we'll move on to item 3.4. There's a slight adjustment to this item that's on the agenda. We've already approved the minutes for the June 2nd meeting, so we'll be looking for a motion or an approval for the minutes for the April 21st and the June 16th Planning Commission meetings.
I'll make a motion to approve item 3.4 minutes for April 21st and June 16th of 2022.
All right, we got a motion by Heather. All in favor? Aye.
Okay.
All right, thank you. We'll move on to administrative item 4.1, but before we do that, we do have a couple of items that are on for public hearing tonight, as outlined in the agenda. So I'd just like to review our public comment policy and procedure. The purpose of public comments is to allow citizens to address items on the agenda. Citizens requesting to address the commission will be asked to complete a written comment form and present it to the city recorder in attendance. In general, the chair will allow an individual 3 minutes to address the commission. A spokesperson recognized as representing a group in attendance may be allowed up to 5 minutes. And this policy also applies to all public hearings. So with that, we'll move on to item 4.1, which is a conditional use consideration, of a site plan for Game Haven. All right.
Okay. Good evening. So this first item is for the Game Haven site plan. We've been working with this group for about, 8 months or so, maybe a little bit more, on getting the site plan put together and before you today. This takes place in the northern part of the city, just in Anthem, on the north part of the Anthem commercial development. This map gives you a better idea of where the project takes place at. It's north of Anthem Park, just south of the storage units, and just behind, I think it's the Utah liquor store there. So, conditional use. This is a conditional use recommendation. And there's a lot of text on this slide, and the reason I did that is our conditional use provisions have changed recently. We talked about that in a meeting, 3 or 4 months ago. They've been codified, and so these are the requirements that we're reviewing them under now. So I just wanted to kind of walk through each one of them to kind of put in our minds what we're looking at as we review these types of applications in the future. So detrimental effects of decreased street service levels and or traffic patterns, the adequacy of utility systems, service delivery and capacities, connectivity and safety pedestrians and bicyclists, the use due to its nature, including noise, odors, and environmental impacts, the increase in risk of contamination or damage to adjacent properties, and injury or sickness to people, modifications to or installation of signs and exterior lighting that conflict with neighborhood compatibility, arising from incompatible designs, detrimental effects on the tax base and property values, on the current level of economy and government expenditures, on emergency fires and emergency vehicle access, and unusable open space. And then also consider inadequate maintenance of the property and structures in perpetuity, including performance measures, compliance reviews, and monitoring. Essentially, they're the same kind of standards we have looked at before, just kind of stated in a different way. So that being said, this is the proposal. So on the slide here, that you can see the site plan to the south, or on the bottom of it, and then kind of a rendering on the top. The applicant's proposing 2 new buildings, one for the Game Haven business, and then another adjacent building for retail, and they're also be doing 1 drive-through restaurant there. The finished materials are stucco siding and metal trim with glass openings, obviously. They do have their letter from the Anthem commercial group approving the site plan, approving the elevations that have been proposed tonight. They're providing 41 parking stalls, which meets the minimum requirements, and then 15% landscaping, which also meets the minimum requirements. This is just a closer view of the materials that are being proposed, some different renderings and specifications on which material goes where. Again, some different renderings of each of those buildings to kind of get a perspective and a better idea of what is taking place on the property. And we can come back to these if you have any questions on those. So here's the site plan. You can see the 2 buildings outlined, and then the parking area. There's a drive-through on the south end of the retail building, and then the drive-through on Game Haven is on the east side of the building. That will basically be servicing a cafe, which they have inside the building for drive-through service there. So one of the things as we looked at this in terms of consideration and those conditional use provisions is the location of the dumpster that's been provided. So in order for them to access this dumpster, they'll be driving down the adjacent property driveway. So the adjacent property, I believe, is the tire store. And so staff is requiring or requesting them to provide some sort of letter from the adjacent property owner that allows that access to occur. If they're not granted that access, they'll have to change the location of the dumpster and they can either work with staff or come back to the commission as you see fit to relocate that dumpster location and show how that will work at the site plan. There's also a solid metal gate that should be shown on the dumpster. I think they're providing a cedar fencing on that, and that should be metal. Bicycle parking is also not included in the plan, but can very easily be accommodated at the front of the building, in front of either of those buildings, so that's another requirement. This is the landscaping plan that's been provided. At the time that they've been working through the requirements, the city did require the 75% live growth coverage. Since they've been working through this process, we've changed our standards to match the Jordan Valley Water Conservation Group standards of 50%. And there's also some requirements for tree staking, and then there's some water drainage requirements that are minimal and they won't affect the overall site plan. That just need to be revised and addressed. With that being said, we do recommend approval of the proposed site plan with those conditions that are shown there. And if there's any questions on any of those, I'd be glad to answer. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Clint. Let's see.
The applicant is here, and
Okay, perfect.
They'd be glad to come up and
Great.
speak to those.
We'll go ahead and invite the applicant to come forward and provide any additional information that they would like to share with the commission at this time. Go ahead and state your name for the record as well.
My name is Sean Lakeroads. I am going to be the owner of the proposed plan. I don't know if you guys had any questions for the proposal.
Is there any questions? Did you have anything else you'd like to bring up? Did Clint do a good enough job for you?
This is new to
Introducing
me
it.
to do a meeting like this, so.
Yeah, if there's any additional information you may want us to know about, feel free to do that,
Okay.
to provide that to us, or,
No, I think this pretty much says what we're doing.
Okay.
We're pretty excited to be part of the community. We're also pretty excited to offer something new to the community, so.
great, excellent. Is there any questions for the applicant at this time? No? Well,
No, not at
thank
this
you.
time.
Thank you, Sean. We'll go ahead and let you have a seat if something comes up. Go ahead and open it up for discussion amongst planning commission.
Can we go back to the site plan? That's good there. I just looking at the drives that are running around the buildings. It seems like some of those radiuses are pretty tight for the cars, a typical car to move around. In fact, if I'm looking at this right on the top of the screen, making that curve out from the east side of the building to the back side, the north side of the building, it looks like the mock-up of the car is just, looks like it's not making it around. Has engineering looked at it?
Yeah.
I don't know if it's in the packet. We did ask that question. They gave us an exhibit showing a Suburban going through that they modeled through AutoCAD.
Okay, yeah, and I'm just looking at it graphically saying, gosh, it looks awful tight.
Yeah, so we were asking the same question and they did satisfy us on that.
So engineering's okay with this layout, what they've got proposed so far?
We are, yeah. Yep.
Okay.
They did an auto turn
Okay.
exhibit on that.
Any other discussion, thoughts? I like the way just, for some of us, this is somewhat new looking at this, but I do like the way the connectivity is with for the pedestrians through this site. I think that's very good, the way they've provided separate, it looks like concrete walks through the parking lots and across the driveway, the drive-up aisles, so I do appreciate that connectivity.
I don't know if it's a concern, like stacking from like one coming around to the other, but I guess kind of depends what the uses are.
Yeah, I guess we don't know what the uses are yet for those drive-up opportunities, but I'm assuming that will be considered as a part of permitting.
So they do meet the ordinance requires them to show that they can provide 5 stacking spaces, which they've done on both of those, so they do meet that requirement.
Okay.
Okay.
Can you go to the materials? Okay, thanks. So are those metal or are those tile? What kind of materials are there?
So, the architect is here.
Yeah.
Can speak to those a little bit better.
Yeah, please.
Roland Lee, project architect with Ridgeline Design Architects.
Thank you.
It's actually, because we're trying to save money, so it's a stucco that actually has a secondary finish that smooths out to make it look metallic, but it's actually a stucco. Okay. So we get the same benefit of the ephes underneath for the insulation, and then the stucco finish for the cost effectiveness versus the metal.
Okay.
This is just a material that I'm not familiar with. Can you help us understand the longevity of it, the durability of it, all that?
It's exactly the same durability as a stucco. So basically what they do is they put the finish on, so the ephes and then the stucco, and then they actually put another coat and then they sand that down. And then it actually is smooth, and then they put the color variations in that. So the longevity is as long as, a normal stucco and warranty and durability.
So all these colors, I mean, it's the same material, just a different finish on it.
Yes, except for the wood, that would be the.
Number 8, is that what we were?
We probably won't do real wood, obviously. We do the different options for those.
Looks like, yeah, 2, 7, and 8 would probably be different materials.
So my question is, does this meet the city's requirements for percentage of brick, stone, metal? Because it appears that the metal is just trim and not panels. And maybe the city could answer that.
Sorry, I was responding to another question from Clint. What's the question on this?
If the materials meets the city's code for percentage of durable materials versus stucco.
So this is in the Anthem MDA.
Okay.
And so that document governs the finished materials, and basically, and so they've got the letter from the Anthem MDA group, their architectural review committee, that has, granted approval.
Granted approval on this, okay.
Okay.
They are certainly different than
Yeah.
what the city standards are, but yes, they do meet those minimum requirements.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else? It sounds like a lot of this is meeting the MDA requirements. It's meeting, it's meeting the ordinances. It's meeting everything that we have before us. Is there any other discussion? Are we ready?
I'm ready to make a motion.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve item 4.1 with staff's 9 recommendations.
All right, we have a motion by Heather. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second by Forrest. We'll go ahead and call for a vote. Brody?
Yes.
Forrest?
Yes.
Heather?
Yes.
Daryl?
Yes.
And Andrea?
Yes.
And that motion passes. Thank you so much for your time. We'll go ahead and move on to item 4.2, which is a reconsideration. This has been brought to us before, but this is a reconsideration to approve the preliminary plat for the Hidden Oaks West subdivision. And looks like Clint's on the clock as well. And this will be open for a public hearing later in this discussion.
Right. So there isn't a presentation with this. It's a pretty simple request. So this subdivision came before the Planning Commission a few months ago. One of the conditions of approval, condition number 11, states that the developer provide a sewer easement for the Doxy property triangle piece. After this condition was made, the applicant came back and they have filed an appeal to remove this condition. And as we've looked at it with our city attorney, this condition is not substantiated by any of our current city ordinances. So we, in lieu of the appeal, the pending appeal, we thought that we'd just bring it back to the commission and see if there was consensus in removing that requirement from the conditions of approval. So that is the decision before you tonight.
Okay. Very good. Is the applicant here? Like to present any other information for us? Thanks, Clint.
I'm Ben Duzette from Focus Engineering. Ben Hansen, who's the applicant, is actually out of town with his family this week, so
Okay.
unfortunately couldn't attend, but I'm here on his behalf. Yeah, I think it was said pretty much what needs to be said. The applicant does want you guys to know that they're planning on working with the property owner to the south to figure something out for them. Just don't feel like it can be a requirement. So.
Okay. Any questions for Ben? All right. Well, thank you. Appreciate your time. As mentioned, this is on for a public hearing. So at this time, we will go ahead and open up the public hearing. If there's anybody who would like to comment on this particular item, they may step forward as well. Did we receive any electronic comments on this? Okay. All right. Seeing no comments, we will go ahead and close the hearing at this time. Is there any discussion by the Planning Commission? This time? Heather?
I mean,
Sounds like recommendation
Yep.
by our attorney as well.
Exactly. That's my thoughts is we
Yeah.
listen to our legal counsel.
Right. So I guess I'll entertain a motion then.
Wait a second. So, council, the issue at
Daryl's
hand-
not so sure.
The issue at hand is not necessarily the decision that was made, but the decision that was made doesn't have a leg to stand on because we don't have an ordinance or a code to support that.
Right.
Therefore, even an opinion rendered in good faith is only as good as the code it's based on or the ordinance based on, so.
Right.
All right, I just need to have
Just
that
for,
out loud.
just for maybe some additional clarification, when Ivory had expressed concerns with the condition, staff did review our standards, and there are standards that would be applicable if the property were part of the subdivision. If it's within the boundary of the subdivision, we did have standards that would require the provision of an easement. But whereas it was outside of the boundaries of the subdivision, we did not find that there was any justification or, ordinance that would support the condition.
Is that, is this like a one and done case, or is it something the city wants to look at to create to expand that ordinance? I mean, the easement's not a bad idea, but if it's not based on anything, you can't do it.
I think we would have to research whether or not, essentially, this would be like an off-site improvement. You know, is there a legal nexus or rationale that could be justified by a city to require that? We would have to research that.
Understood.
Are there other properties like this that aren't part of subdivisions that?
You know, to be honest, I think this is the first property that I've been aware of where there's been development adjacent to a home that's on septic. So it's not something that's common, at least not in the areas where we've historically have seen development recently. I'm sure further west in the city, in this part of the city, there are other properties, right, that are on septic.
Yeah, I'm just wondering about like redevelopment in the future or future development, if there'd be more issues like this.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Good discussion. Go ahead. You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready to make a motion. I'll make a motion to approve item 4.2.
Is that enough? Okay, we go
I'll
ahead.
second that.
All right, we have a motion by Heather and a second by Brody. We'll go ahead and call for a vote at this time. Andrea?
Yes.
Daryl?
Yes.
Heather?
Yes.
Forrest?
Yes.
And Brody?
Yes.
Thank you. That does pass. We would encourage, though, that they continue to work with the property owners, so appreciate that as well. So, very good. Thank you. We'll go ahead and move on to item 4.3, which is a consideration of approval to amend a site plan for a conditional use to allow for an addition to an LDS church building. Item 4.3.
All right, good evening.
Sheldon.
All right, so this is an amendment to a conditional use. The property is located down in the Juniper Bend area, up off Juniper Crest Road. Here's the site. It's an existing church site. The applicant's asking to extend the actual building itself. So the conditional use was approved back in June 14, 2007. The overall site's about 18 acres, but they only developed about 5 acres of that site. The existing structure is just over about 16,500 square feet, and they're planning to an additional 2,600 square feet. They're planning to extend the building, I guess, to the east. With this extension, they're not encroaching any of the required parking. They're replacing all the landscaping. As far as ordinances go, they're still in compliance with the conditions of approval from the original approval back in 2007, if I remember that correctly, and current ordinances as well. Here's some elevations. What they're intending to do is obviously they're going to remove that portion of the building, and they're going to reconstruct it identically to how it was prior to the demolition. So again, the extension is going to be about 30 feet from the existing building. Again, they're going to match the existing colors, materials, roof pitch, etc. So as far as considerations of approval, engineering had no concerns. As I mentioned, meets all zoning ordinances, and it does meet all the conditions of our conditional use standards. Therefore, the staff does recommend approval of this item. The applicant is here if you have any questions for them, or any questions for me.
All right, so the one condition that you have there. Okay,
Yeah,
very
that's
good.
just-
All right, any questions for Sheldon before we? Okay, thank you. We'll go ahead and invite the applicant to come forward, provide any additional information that might help us in our decision tonight.
Hi, I'm Chad Spencer. I'm the architect on the project, and I don't have anything further if you have any questions.
Okay, any questions? I might have one with, it was built in '07, the materials probably have faded and stuff, and I guess the matching of it with new materials and whatnot. What's your
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
Yeah, so one good thing about brick is it holds its color fairly well. There is going to be some variation, but one of the good things is it stops where the addition is. There's actually a column that steps out, so we'll be able to tooth that brick in. So there is a little out of plane where that addition occurs. The biggest area, I think, will be the shingles. And I think you'll see it, but I think that's just the nature of doing an addition on a building.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Anything else? All right, thank you, appreciate your time. All right, any discussion from the commission? Any thoughts?
No, it's really straightforward on this one.
Okay. Is that a motion then, Brody?
I'll make a motion to approve item 4.3, consideration of approval to amend the site plan of a conditional use to allow for an addition to the LDS Church building.
Okay, we have a motion by Brody
Second.
and a second by Forrest. We'll go ahead and call for a vote at this time. Brody?
Yes.
Forrest?
Yes.
Heather?
Yes.
Daryl?
Yes.
And Andrea?
Yes.
All right, that item passes as well. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate you being here. We'll go ahead and move on to item 4.4, which is a conditional use consideration of a site plan for the Jeff Deering commercial site. Who's got this? Natalia?
All right. Yeah, as you mentioned, this is another conditional use permit. This is a commercial site located in the northern part of the city. It's located behind that 7-Eleven, if that kind of helps, near Rosecrest Road. The proposal is 3 separate buildings equaling about a little under 29,000 square feet. They're providing 131 parking stalls, which meets the parking requirement. They are wanting to have 2 drive-through fast food restaurants. This is why the buildings are moved up a little bit. In our code, we do have a provision that prevents having those speakers next to residential. So they provided the parking as a buffer to be able to include drive-throughs. The proposed building is mostly brick. There's some stucco as well with metal canopies. Then, of course, the glass windows and doors. The building height is about 25 feet. There are 4 separate units in each of the buildings. And as I mentioned, the two of the buildings have a drive-through fast food restaurant. As we were reviewing it, engineering has a few minor corrections they would like to continue to go over with the applicant, and with them some landscaping corrections as well. On the planning side of things, they meet all the setbacks, restrictions, and material requirements that are found in city code. There were a couple concerns with site lighting standards, which will be a condition as well to fix. And as we went through the conditional use standards, they do meet those standards of code. So staff does recommend approval with the following conditions to continue working with engineering just to finalize those minor corrections that they had, and that shouldn't change the site plan, and to comply with a few of the landscaping standards as well, and to comply with the applicable zoning standards, including site lighting, pollution controls. So I'm happy to answer any question, and I believe members, the applicant is here as well.
Very good. Any Questions? Yeah.
Are the conditions specific enough for the applicant? That was one of my thoughts.
Yeah.
Just
That was
'cause
a
it says
thought, too.
comply
I was actually
comply
gonna
with
ask the
all
applicant
applicable
that.
engineering standards. It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and you can ask him. He's
we
here.
can ask them that when they
Yeah.
step forward here in a minute. Anything else for Taya? Okay, go ahead and let you have a seat. The applicant's here, please come forward, state your name for us as well.
So my name is Christopher Thompson. I am here in behalf of Curtis Minor Architecture. I'm the project architect and in behalf of the client.
All right, is there any additional information you'd like to provide to us?
Maybe just some clarification. So you asked the question about the general following those applicable engineering standards. I have reviewed those notes, and there's a few that are very minor, and I will specifically make sure that those are complied with.
Okay.
And they seem very reasonable, so none of them seem like big hurdles. So I
No
felt like
concerns.
those were comfortable
Okay.
requests.
That's
So
perfect.
Perfect. Anything else for the applicant? All right, appreciate your time, thank you. All right, any discussion from the commission?
Sir.
Can we go back to the site plan? So in looking at this earlier today in the packet, I'm a little concerned with kind of the disjointedness of the little parking areas and drive-through areas, and it seems very small in some areas, very tight for cars. Just need to make sure that engineering is okay with the turn radiuses and the small little islands that become everyone's wheel scrapers in between the drive-throughs and the other parking areas.
Guess maybe if
Or just the
engineering's
pull
here,
outs.
yeah, come on up and, similar question as before about,
Yeah, it was similar. We had those same concerns that they are meeting all the minimums that they need to, and they did show us that vehicles can get through there, so.
yeah. The one question, maybe concern I had as I was looking at this is those parking lots, or the parking spots that you see on that south end there's really no connection via pedestrian or walkway or anything like that. They're just kind of at their own, there's no way to really, there's not a good way to get them to an adjacent sidewalk or anything like that.
Right, they have to cross traffic
Yeah.
to get to
Yeah.
any of the buildings and.
Right. That was a concern that I had when I was.
Well,
starting
same
to
with
look at
this one here. I mean, this one out here, I mean, that's
Yeah,
pretty remote.
Exactly. Yeah, it's remote as well, so. Sorry.
I'm one of the civil engineers on this project. I think I can
Okay.
at least answer a little bit of the
Go ahead and
reason
state your
behind
name. State your name for the record. as
Yeah, I'm
well.
Hiram Osgathorpe with Benchmark Engineering.
Okay.
And just kind of the nature of the site, it slopes down towards that east side. And so we need an area to kind of make up some of that elevation. And so we need to keep that.
That's why that's
I don't wanna
separated
say we
the
need to,
parking
but
lot.
That's why it's separated and there's not a pathway through that area because we need to gain a little bit of elevation. That was the best area that we could find to put a little step in so that we don't have too steep of parking lot over there on the east where doors are slamming into the adjacent cars or anything like that. So that was the reason behind not connecting the parking lot to the rest of the site.
So there'll be a retaining wall between the two parking spots.
Not a huge one, but yeah, there will be a little bit of a grade break between those areas that wouldn't allow just a regular path to a pedestrian path through there.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Any other
Before you
questions
sit
for the
down.
engineer?
Yeah, before you sit down. We're talking about that southeast parking lot, kind of an island parking lot. It just looks like I don't want to call them hammerheads. The backouts are awfully narrow. You've modeled them, and they meet the standards, and cars can make that movement.
Cars, yeah, they can make them. We've done some modeling. It's not easy for them to make it, but they are able to.
I mean, it looks like it's only like a 3 foot.
Yeah, it doesn't.
The alternative would be, you lose 2 parking stalls, so make that pull out deeper, but
Right.
I don't know what that does for his count.
Yeah,
Well, and
we-
you have a similar condition too on the front of this building, where you've got your handicap parking and then your concrete parking outside of the asphalt. There's just not a lot of room to have the cars go back and forth and pull in, pull out.
Well, that's probably the minimum mile widths and stuff like that through that
Yeah.
area. But I am curious, that's a good question about the number of stalls, or how close are they in meeting their required stall count, and what, maybe, Tal, you can answer that for us too. Is there a way to maybe, can we reduce a couple stalls to help improve, the situation
Yeah,
here?
I had calculated, and sorry, I'd have to pull it back up. I think they were pretty close. If they had a few extra, not much though.
Not a lot extra.
So if we dropped 2 stalls, then he could take the 9 foot, the width of those stalls, and add
Shift
them
that out a little
to
bit.
right or left, right and left.
Yeah. Well, you need it on both ends of that one.
Correct. So you just split that 9
Yeah.
foot.
Yeah. Something to be considered.
I don't know, I think I would have to say someone needs to look a square in the eye and say it works
Yeah.
before I could go with it.
Well, well, that's just it. There's a couple things we can do with that. We could make them come back, or we could make them, make a condition of approval, as well. To have a look at that. I don't know if, again, maybe city engineer, if there's any concerns you have. I'm not sure if you're following our discussion here with the parking on that east side.
Yeah, it looks
I know.
tight. I think if you're in a Honda Civic, you're okay. If you're in an F-350, you're probably not going to park there.
Yeah, you shouldn't. You wouldn't even go in that spot, in that area there. Any thoughts on pedestrian movements as well? I guess, is there any, there's probably not a requirement that we have, that they're probably meeting the requirements for any.
So they meet the requirement that there's a pedestrian connection out to the right-of-way.
Yeah.
Each building has a connection between them. I think maybe some of those parking areas would be more employee parking.
That's kind of what I was thinking as well when I was looking at it. You're not going to want to have your patrons right next to the drive-through as well, so.
Well, and we just went through a training that if it meets the requirements. So, again, requirements trump opinion, so.
Good point.
If it meets the requirements, our staff said it does, so.
Yeah. It's just a recommendation that they.
Yeah. Well, and we could
More usable.
Yeah, we could even make a part of it just to revisit and make sure that it's.
What are our options, Mike?
If you're going to make an additional condition, we just recommend that you tie it to one of those conditional use standards that are outlined in your staff report. Just use, find a way to make sure you can justify it, so.
On the northernmost drive, looks like there's a dead end. I'm assuming that there's plans to possibly continue that through to the street next to the 7-Eleven.
So that's a good question for us. There was the subdivision that came in splitting that into 2 pieces, maybe a month or 2 ago. That one did have that section, was being constructed in that. Okay. So where it says, do not block, and you just go a little bit to the right there, that strip connecting into the existing driveway over by 7-Eleven, that was being constructed in that set. So it is there. Right. So it won't dead end right there.
Can you go back to where the options are, the conditions?
Probably the last slide.
Recommendations. The only one I could reference would be the ability to service property. Those parking stalls are not.
What does service mean? Is that from a patron side, or is that from emergency services side, or is that from a, oh boy, here we go. No, I thought he was coming up to give us some guidance on this. But maybe it is both.
Yeah, I'm thinking it's both.
Yeah.
And obviously, if this passes, the fire marshal ability to get to the buildings. You know, that's a 12-foot wide.
That's the main one we need, right?
Now, obviously, they're not going to have emergency vehicles parked in the little parking areas off to the side, so that's not a big deal. But like you said, it's the back out areas. You know, if an F-150 or I don't know, majority of cars are 18 feet long unless you go with the subcompact. So any 18-foot long car is going to have an issue backing up without that much space.
Well, and if you go forward one more slide as well, right, the first condition applicable, you know, applicant's final plan shall comply with all applicable engineering standards. So
Right.
that is a condition that is on there, so.
Yeah.
As well, so.
Well, you know, if he has ample parking, then you could lose those 2 stalls and make it just a better product.
Yeah, and that could be not a recommend, or I mean, it could be a suggestion, not a.
But if he's already if he's at minimum right now, then, and it meets engineering, what we just heard.
Something to consider, though.
It's a suggestion.
Not, more like a guideline, more than that.
Keep looking at our attorney to see what he's.
I know. Just watching him flinch.
We're trying to be objective and not
Make it
subjective. But,
All right, is there any other discussion we want on this? There's nothing.
I don't even know what to recommend.
Well, we've got, you know, it's got to comply with the engineering and landscaping standards and lighting and, you know, it's.
I don't
Those
believe the engineering standards that have already been commented on, they don't refer to the parking at all, do they? They sounded like they were other things
Does
involved.
engineering standards include parking? Yeah.
Yeah, it does,
but yeah.
But we've already heard from our engineer that it does meet.
Right.
So how can you make a recommendation to lose 2 parking stalls if it already meets it?
Yeah.
Okay, well.
I'll entertain a motion.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion that we approve item 4.4, conditional use consideration of the site plan for the Jeff Deering commercial site located at 12480 South Rosecrest Road.
With staff's.
With staff's 3 recommendations.
Perfect. So we have a motion by Forrest
I'll second it.
and a second by Darrell. All right, we'll go ahead and call for a vote. Brody?
Yes.
Forrest?
Yes.
Heather?
Yes.
Darrell?
Yes.
And Andrea?
Yes.
All right, that motion passes. Thank you for that as well. We'll move on to item 4.5, which is a consideration to approve the preliminary plat for J&J Farms subdivision. Tally is up again.
All right, so this subdivision is located close to us here. We recently rezoned this area a couple months ago to the C2 and R110 here. And today, the subdivision that's being proposed today is, the majority of it is in the R110 zone. So like I said, it was approved the rezone was approved back in January. The R110 area has about 7.12 acres, while the C2 zone has 2.7 acres. The general plan had a density restriction of 1.8 to 2.7, so that was a zoning condition that was placed on the area. The applicant held a community meeting on June 15th, where a couple residents came, and public notices for this meeting were also sent out on June 27th. Here is the proposed subdivision. There's 15 residential lots. They are in the R110 zone, so they would meet the minimum lot width of 80 feet, and homes would meet the setbacks of 25 feet for the front. Sides would have 8, but 18 for both sides combined. and the rear would have 25, while any portion of uncovered or covered deck or patio would have 20 feet. The other commercial lots, as I pointed out, are not part of this subdivision. The pond is in the commercial zone, just for reference. Here is a clear image of that and flipped the opposite direction. With this subdivision, there are a couple engineering, I guess not concerns, but corrections that need to be made. There will need to be an easement recorded from this, from the street they're creating. And I believe that is scheduled for this next city council meeting, where I believe Blake is taking that, and maybe answer more specifics on that. Another easement would need to be recorded to the pond itself, because it does go through that commercial area, as I was saying. There are a couple landscaping corrections as well. They need a little bit more live coverage with trees. As for the zoning and planning side of things, they are meeting the precast fencing requirement that is between commercial zones and residential zones, as you can see along there. They will need to put in the vinyl fence in between the R110 zone and the agricultural zones. It is meeting all of the other zoning requirements. So here are the specifics of the conditions of approval. That's those two easements that I mentioned for the street and to access the pond. And the fence, as I mentioned as well. And I believe the rest are referencing the landscaping requirements and corrections. There is an existing curb cutout that we noticed on the, let's see, it would be the, I guess that would be the south side. So we just made that a requirement as well to fix that curb cutout, as it won't be part of the street. So we do recommend approval with the stated conditions of approval.
Very good. Any questions for Talia? All right, thank you. Yeah. Is the applicant here like to provide any additional insight on this development for us, please? Go ahead and again state your name for the record.
Yeah. My name's Alex Winder. I'm with Buller Development, and just here to answer any questions you guys have. So.
Okay. Any questions? No? All right, we may call you back up. So this item is on for public hearing. So at this time, I will go ahead and open up the public hearing if there's anybody in the audience that would like to come and provide any comment on this item, this particular item. Again, if you could state the name for us.
Yeah, my name's Lynn Egbert. I live at 13403 South. I also represent the Crane property that's at 12983 South. Some questions. There's a landlocked area that Gary Ballard has. It was a problem that was created from a past planning council member. And I'd like to know if Bullers are going to purchase that so it's not landlocked. Also, I'm concerned about the flood water. I've talked to the city about that. On a normal year, not these dry years, there's a lot of water. It comes all the way down 130, clear from 6225 West. It includes the church parking lot on 6,000, and it includes a parking lot from the old city hall. And that's a lot of water, and historically it's just gone out onto JE's property. and now there's homes. And having lived here in Harriman for quite a while, I know there's a long history of flooding basements. And I would hope that something could be mitigated so that doesn't happen to these new homes going in there. Also, some of the residents there were told that because they were in an agricultural zone, there would be a block wall or a concrete wall put in there instead of a vinyl fence. And that was a question we'd like to raise too. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay. All right. Did we get any electronic comments on this particular item? All right. Seeing no other comments, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing at this time. We go ahead and, Alex, if you'd like to come up and maybe respond to a couple of his questions that he had, we'll give you that opportunity at this time.
Yeah, sure. We are planning on buying the sliver that Gary Ballard has.
Okay.
So that'll be taken care of. And then we've always planned on putting precast up against the agricultural, so.
The precast instead of the vinyl, the walls, okay. And I don't know if there was a question about and maybe this needs to be city, talking about the water coming down, but I'm assuming the detention basin and everything that's associated with that. I don't know if there's anything you want to bring up, Alex, or if we could let engineering maybe answer that question as well for the gentleman.
Engineering wants to answer
Yeah.
it, but I know that once it hits our property, it'll go in the storm drain,
Yeah.
so.
And you've got your own detention basin, so obviously you're taking care of your stormwaters.
Yeah,
Okay,
we can't
very
control
good.
what's coming from
Absolutely.
west of us.
No,
So.
totally understood. So, okay, thank you. Would engineering like to comment on that? That question's a very good, discussion point.
Yeah, I mean, the flooding that Lynn talked about, that's existing upstream condition for sure. This is still a 70% plan set. They don't have final engineering approval from us. We will be looking at that kind of stuff. How is that stormwater going to pass through? Make sure those homes are protected. So it is something we're thinking about.
Perfect. Thank you. Appreciate that. All right. Any discussion from the group?
Yeah, again, if we can go back to the site plan. Oop. The one that shows the easements, that, I guess is forward from here. Keep going.
Not that one, huh?
Next one.
I thought I saw one that had the easement. For the pond, there's an easement running over to the pond. I'm not sure the property that we're talking about, that the easement is going across, but graphically, the way it's showing, that easement kind of cuts off the corner of the adjoiner's
Of the commercial property.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering if there's a smarter way to route that easement so it doesn't interfere so much with that property.
Unless they're willing to work through that, yeah.
And then maybe that's just part of the
Yeah,
plating
part of the-
process.
yeah.
You're talking
Negotiation.
You're talking about this one here.
Yeah, if you go forward, there was maybe one more. Yeah, this kind of shows that
This'll
corner.
work.
That's the one. Yeah.
So C4, yeah, where it has the easement coming out of the subdivision into the pond.
Yeah.
I know that's just graphic, it's probably preliminary, so is there a better way to route that easement so it doesn't interfere with the adjoiner's property? That would be to the west of the subdivision.
Yeah.
Yeah, like right out, move between lots 101 and 102 instead of
Slide over.
outside of the subdivision
Yeah.
and bring it back in. But
We put it there because of the sewer. So that path is the sewer line as well.
okay.
Oh, it's an
So there's an
existing sewer line there.
easement.
So
That's where it's gonna go, yeah, and then that'll all be commercial where the angle part is, and so that'll,
And you're working with that property owner then at this
We
time?
own it.
Oh, you own it as well? Gotcha.
Oh.
All right, never mind.
I withdraw my comment.
Thank you for that clarification. Any other thoughts? Excited, there's some nice sized lots here, good opportunity, some really good lots coming in, so.
Yeah, I think the only correction would be
You want to go to the staff recommendations then?
Number 3, it states the vinyl fence between proposed residential development and existing agricultural uses. But we were requesting,
I think this is the requirement, right? But he's saying.
That's the standard.
That's the standard,
Yeah.
but they're stating that they are willing to.
They're planning on
They're
doing
planning on doing
okay,
something
sounds good.
more. So,
Should we
but that's
add
the
that,
standard. We
or-
can't deviate from the standard.
It's true. Okay.
All right. So again, hopefully in good faith, they'll continue to do that as well. So yeah, these are the conditions of approval presented by staff.
all right, well, I'll make a motion to approve item 4.5 with the 6 conditions of approval.
Very good. We have a motion by Heather
Second?
and a second by Daryl. We'll go ahead and call for a vote. Andrea?
Yes.
Daryl?
Yes.
Heather?
Yes.
Forrest? Yes. And Brody?
Yes.
All right, that item passes as well. Thank you so much for your time and appreciate the public being here as well and being a part of this. Any comments from the commission at this time for staff or anyone else? Any other thoughts?
Yes, sorry, I was just thinking about this. So earlier we were talking about parking. I would love to revisit parking and just add something to our code where the planning commission can modify plans. So for example, we had Walmart come in and part of their, was it the MDA? The MDA had a requirement for parking, but I would love to be able to, make exceptions to a few parking spots rather than ripping out like loads of landscaping.
So there's currently in our ordinance now, if the applicant provides a parking study, they can reduce those. So if Walmart would have provided a parking study, they could have reduced those. Same in, for the Jeff Gearing project tonight, if they provided a parking study, that could potentially reduce the number of required stalls. They just didn't provide that information.
It's easier to comply with it than spend the.
Easier to comply than provide the study.
Then provide a
But do we
separate study.
require, do we really need a parking study for, a few spots? Like, is that necessary?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it kind of is. Yeah, to make sure. But again, it's whether our standards are, hopefully they're in, meeting the others and practice as well. It's not something that's crazy with our parking standards or requirements, right?
Perhaps what I'm hearing, though, in, the 2 cases that you're citing tonight and then previously, it doesn't sound like you're concerned about the quantity of parking per se. You're more interested in circulation and perhaps having some flexibility in favor of landscaping.
Landscaping.
So maybe there are some
Pedestrian access,
opportunities to have some flexibility when there are certain conditions that are present.
Yeah.
Certain, obviously the difficulty is how do you anticipate every condition, right? Every nuance. Some cities do have a parking maximum. We have not done that. We tend to have, we do allow basically as much as they can fit, as long as they're meeting other, setbacks and landscaping coverage. And but we could probably do a work session on parking standards or our parking ordinance. I think the other, well, anyway, yeah.
Our standards are pretty much in line with other communities and things like that, right?
Pretty
I mean, it's pretty
typical.
standard.
Pretty typical.
Pretty standard.
Actually, and I don't know, I mean, my career, the ability to reduce parking as easily as we do with a parking impact study has actually been unique. I have not had that tool in other communities that I've worked in. I don't know about Clint, but I think that's been a useful tool when an applicant has requested it.
I think there's, in other cities, in Ogden specifically, they had a shared parking standard. If you had shared parking, you could automatically reduce the number of required stalls by like 10%.
I like that.
Yeah.
There might be some standards we could look at, but.
It'd be good just to review them, just because.
Just so we're aware, right?
Well, so we're aware, and, historically, we require so many more stalls that are necessary. And,
you're looking for peak, what is it, Christmas Eve?
Black Friday.
Parking,
Our challenge
Black Friday
again
park.
has not been applicants having difficulty meeting the standard. It's usually they want to provide more than we require, typically. That's usually been our,
So we're not seeing
the
any,
impact, right?
no issues from the applicants coming in wanting to
Typically,
reduce it
yeah.
typically.
So do we have a mechanism then to limit them on the number of parking spaces? Because that may.
So that's what we're
may
talking
be
about, a
something-
maximum, right? There's not a
Right.
maximum ordinance that we have.
Like if a store comes in and they're only required to have 15 parking spots, but they want to put in 100 parking spots just in case they have a sale one day and lots of people come with their boats or whatever it is, do we have a mechanism? It may be valuable to have that kind of mechanism.
And there's a trade-off. I mean,
Yeah.
a parking lot is, you could almost see it as land banking, right? Oftentimes in urban centers, you'll see that there's a parking lot, but it's ideal for future redevelopment.
Sure.
And we've seen that recently with Smith's. There's been some parking areas that have been converted to another land use, right? So there is some trade-off there, or you could also say, but it also creates an urban heat island. It is, maybe discourages a higher and better land use if you're putting it into just overflow parking. So there's a.
Yeah, it
there's two
discourages
sides to that
walkability
coin.
and things of that nature, so.
Yeah.
Except for the person.
If it comes into conditional use, you could always look at those requirements, is it detrimental to any of those, that list of requirements, and if you can make a finding based off of that, then that's something.
Yeah.
Good discussion. Anything
I
else?
just have one
Yeah,
thought.
Brody.
I'm just curious if we're pushing any like landscaping swells that would be in like park strips for landscaping versus detention ponds with each subdivision that comes in. Just curious if there's a push for that at all. Just 'cause from a development perspective, they kind of lose a lot every time there's a new subdivision, and I think there's better ways to use park strips for landscaping swells.
For low-impact development, we do actually offer that.
Yeah.
I've been a little surprised. I don't know if our engineering, how they feel, but we have really not seen requests for that. We thought we would. We thought we would see swales in park strips, but it just hasn't been coming.
Yeah, it's kind of unfortunate because it's like that's a more natural way for the water, right, than having it go all the way into a specific area.
I would recommend, I think we could relook at our standards for the placement and design of these detention ponds, like the one we saw tonight. That's going to be maintained by the city. It's going to be a public system. And, oftentimes they double as open space. That one is not really going to be accessible.
Yeah.
Right.
And we have to maintain it. Who really is going to benefit from that?
Yeah, it just feels like a waste of
maybe the location
city
and maybe
resources.
adjusting some standards of where those can go might be warranted.
Yeah, like if it could be size related. Say if it's so small that it's not usable, then they have to look at other options.
Yeah. I can tell you our landscape architect, Heidi, she would love to have that discussion with you.
Let's have it.
So whatever we can do to help encourage that.
Yeah.
Well, and I think we discussed that in a previous meeting as well, is that, try and utilize those spaces as much as possible, have them actually designed as parks instead of, and I know adding parks is kind of like the no-no for us right now because we don't want to pay for it, but, if we can get those detention basins and areas for water control, make them usable and not just a green space that gets mowed. That'd be good.
I guess, that would be my recommendation. Bring the landscape architect for one of our trainings.
Yeah.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
Like that. Anything else? All right, very good. Great meeting, guys, thanks. Future meetings coming up on July 13th, City Council meeting, and on July 21st of this month, we'll meet again as a Planning Commission. And then on July 27th, another City Council meeting.
I think that one's going to be canceled.
Oh, that one's going to be canceled,
Yeah,
July
it's-
27th? Okay.
I don't think it's been officially announced yet, but I think that will be canceled.
Okay. Scratch that from the record. All right. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Did I hear that from Forrest? All right, we have a motion by adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Just want to make sure we got it on the record. It was Forrest, yes.
Sorry, I whispered. I'm not supposed to whisper anymore.
I know, no one likes to say it. It's always Adam.